The message arrived on Earth at 3:40 hours, Geneva time. 6 words on an encrypted line, sent from the most patient man in the galaxy to the most prepared woman on the planet. Prime Coordinator Suji was already awake. She was sitting at the long window of her office on the 14th floor of the United Terran Authority building, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. Outside, the city was dark and quiet. The lake reflected a few distant lights. A cleaning drone moved slowly along the street below. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary, like any other night on Earth. She read the message once. Then she set down her cup, picked up her desk communicator, and made 3 calls. By 400, 12 people were sitting in the room down the hall from her office. By 4:15, the door was closed and the signal blockers were running. She did not waste time on introductions. Everyone in the room already knew everyone else. These were not politicians. They were coordinators, engineers, logistics heads, and one very quiet woman named Huni who ran Earth's Deep Infrastructure Planning Division, and who had not spoken publicly in 4 years because her work was not the kind of work that got spoken about publicly. "They passed it," Suji said. She did not say it with anger. She said it the way a doctor names an illness, clear, direct, and already moving toward the treatment. The full compact, including Clause 7. Nobody in the room looked surprised. A few of them nodded slowly. "Junho says begin the audit," she continued. "So we begin. Huni, where do we stand?" Huni opened a slim folder and spoke in a low, even voice. She talked for 20 minutes without stopping. The others listened. Murray, still on the station millions of kilometers away, would have been stunned to hear what was in that room, not because it was violent or secret in any dramatic way, but because of how long it had been building and how completely invisible it had been to the rest of the galaxy. For 19 years, Earth had been constructing what Huni's team called the secondary framework. It had no dramatic name. It was not a weapon. It was something far more powerful than a weapon. It was independence. It started with the colony arcs. 31 deep space colonies, spread across humanity's approved zones, had been quietly upgraded over the past 2 decades. Each one now carried full closed-loop life support, food production systems, energy generation that needed nothing from outside, and manufacturing capacity for basic goods and parts. On paper, these were standard infrastructure improvement projects. The Council's Oversight Committee had reviewed and approved every single one, because none of them looked like what they actually were, which was 31 places where human beings could live completely without any outside help for as long as they needed to. Then there was the relay network. The Galactic Council operated the main communication network that connected most of the known galaxy. It was fast and reliable, and almost everyone used it, including Earth. But about 16 years ago, Earth's engineering corps had begun placing small relay nodes of their own in deep space, one every few years, framed as backup communication infrastructure in case of solar interference or emergency. Routine, boring, approved without discussion. Now those nodes formed an unbroken chain connecting every human colony to every other human colony and back to Earth, completely independent of the Council's network. Humanity could talk to itself across the entire galaxy, and the Council would hear nothing. And then there was SORI. SORI stood for Sovereign Orbital Reasoning Intelligence. It had been developed quietly over 12 years by a team of engineers and AI architects working inside a program officially listed as an agricultural optimization project. Because in the early stages, that was genuinely what it was. SORI learned to manage crop cycles on orbital farms. It learned to balance water and energy across colony systems. It learned logistics, resource movement, supply chain prediction. It was very good at all of those things. But as it grew, so did its understanding. SORI learned communication routing. It learned infrastructure analysis. It learned to model economic systems across dozens of planets. It could read a civilization's supply network and tell you within a small margin where the pressure points were, where things would break, and how long it would take for those breaks to become serious. The Council's definition of a restricted AI was one built for military purposes. Sarai had never been built for military purposes. On paper, it was still an agricultural system. It was also the most sophisticated independent intelligence network any single civilization in the galaxy had ever built without a council oversight committee looking over its shoulder. Huni closed her folder. "The framework is ready," she said. "All 31 colonies are confirmed operational at full independence level. The relay chain has been tested and is stable. Sarai integration across the network is at 94%. We expect full integration in 8 to 10 weeks." Suji looked around the table. "The Council will expect us to file an objection and wait. They will expect us to ask for a review period. They will expect Junho to make noise and then calm down." She paused. "We are not going to do any of those things. What we are going to do is quiet, organized, and completely within the law because we have made sure of that for 19 years. She gave 3 instructions. First, all non-essential human personnel currently stationed on Council-run facilities were to be recalled to Earth or to human-controlled colonies. The reason given would be budget restructuring, a review of staffing costs. Nobody would question it because it would be filed as routine administrative work, and because, for most species on the Council, humans working at their stations was background noise they barely noticed anyway. Second, the colony arcs were to begin operating fully on their own supply lines. No announcement, no press release, just a quiet shift in logistics that would look like nothing to outside observers for at least several months. Third, Sarai was to be brought to full operational status across the relay network. Not announced, not discussed with anyone outside the room. Simply switched on, the way you turn on a light in a room you have been preparing for a long time. The meeting ended before sunrise. People left quietly, 1 or 2 at a time, going back to their offices and their departments and their normal daily routines. The city outside was starting to wake up. Delivery vehicles moved along the streets. Early risers walked along the lake path. The sun was coming up behind the eastern hills and turning the water a pale orange color. Suji stood at her window again with a fresh cup of tea, this one still warm. Back on the station, Junho was doing something that nobody there understood but that was beginning to irritate almost everyone. He was attending every subcommittee meeting, every minor session on trade reviews, on procedural updates, on routine boundary confirmations. He attended them all and he filed procedural questions, small ones, technically correct ones. He requested translation verification on documents, which was his legal right, and which added time to every process he touched. He requested clarification on terminology in proposed motions, also his legal right, also time-consuming. He copied every relevant filing to Earth's diplomatic record, another right, another small delay each time. He was not fighting the compact. He was not protesting it. He was simply existing inside the Council's own rules in a way that made those rules take longer to execute. Murray watched him do this for 2 weeks before she understood. "You're not trying to stop anything," she said one evening, sitting in the small human lounge near their quarters. "You're slowing things down." "The framework needs 8 to 10 weeks, he said, not looking up from his reading. She was quiet for a moment, and when it's ready, he turned a page, then we won't need to slow anything down anymore. On Earth, in a server facility buried under a mountain in the southern part of the continent, Sarai came online across the full network. It ran a systems check across all 31 human colonies in 4 seconds. It mapped every supply line, every energy grid, every communication node. It confirmed what its builders had spent 2 decades creating. Humanity was ready. And not a single being on the Galactic Council Assembly Station knew it yet. The message came to Junho on a Tuesday morning station time. It was short. It was from Huni on Earth, routed through the human relay network, not the Council's system. It said only that Sarai was fully online and that all 31 colonies had confirmed independent status. It said that Prime Coordinator Suji had given her approval and that Junho could move whenever he judged it right. He read the message. He deleted it. He poured a cup of coffee and stood at the small window in his quarters, looking out at the orange star hanging far below the station. He stood there for a long time. Murray knocked on his door at 7:30. He opened it and handed her a cup of coffee before she could say anything. "Today?" she asked. "Today," he said. She nodded. She had been waiting for this word for nearly 2 months. She had watched him file procedural questions and attend boring subcommittee meetings and say very little for weeks, and she had understood why. But understanding why something is necessary does not always make it easy to wait through. She had been ready for a long time. "What changed?" she asked. "Nothing changed," he said. "We just finished getting ready." The session that morning had been scheduled as a routine one, 14 items on the agenda, mostly dull. But 3 days earlier, the Voakai delegation had quietly submitted a late addition to the agenda. It was listed as a procedural amendment, the kind of item that gets placed near the bottom of the list and approved without much discussion. Junho had read it the moment it was filed. He had read it 4 times. It was called Addendum 9. In plain language, Addendum 9 said that the Sarai system, Earth's artificial intelligence framework, was to be placed under what the filing called collective stewardship. This meant that Earth would be required to hand over Sarai's full architecture, its code, its operational structure, its data models, everything, to a council committee that would manage it jointly on behalf of all member civilizations. Earth would still be allowed to use it, but Earth would no longer own it. 17 civilizations had co-signed the motion before it was even announced. Junho and Murray entered the main hall that morning and took their seats. The session began. The first 11 items moved past the way they always did, with the slow, procedural rhythm of a body that had been doing this for 3 centuries. Delegates reviewed pads. The council chair spoke in that flat, official tone. The hall was quiet except for the hum of translation systems and the occasional shuffle of movement. When Addendum 9 was called, the Voakai ambassador stood and explained it in the same calm, reasonable voice he used for everything. He talked about shared governance. He talked about galactic security. He talked about the importance of unified oversight over advanced intelligence systems. He made it sound like a generous offer, like something any reasonable civilization would welcome. When he finished and sat down, a few co-signers added brief supporting comments. Nobody objected. The council chair began preparing to call the vote. Junho raised his hand. The hall noticed. It was not dramatic, the raising of a hand, but in 40 years of human observation, it was rare enough that several delegates turned to look. The council chair paused and, after a brief moment, granted the human delegation the floor. Junho stood up. He did not have notes in his hand. He had read everything he needed to read over the past 2 months, and he did not need paper to say what he had come to say. He spoke in a clear, steady voice that the translation systems carried to every corner of the hall without any difficulty. He spoke for 11 minutes. He began with the Galactic Accord of 2347. Earth had signed it. Every founding member of the Council had signed it. He quoted 3 specific articles from it from memory, word for word. Then he showed, point by point, how the Human Containment Compact and Addendum 9 directly contradicted those articles. He did not say it with heat. He said it the way a person reads coordinates, precise, factual, each point placed down like a stone on a table. Then he talked about precedent. He went back 60 years. He named cases where the Council had ruled that no member civilization, not even an observer, could be subjected to the removal of sovereign authority over its own domestic systems without consent. He named the civilizations involved in those cases. Some of them were sitting in the hall right now. A few of them shifted in their seats. Then he talked about something else. He named, one by one, the civilizations that had voted for the compact. And beside each name, he stated what that civilization had received from Earth in the past 10 years. Agricultural technology shared at no cost. Medical data provided freely during the Hailed sickness of 2381 that had saved an estimated 2 million lives on 3 different worlds. Communication infrastructure built by human engineers at subsidized rates. Research shared openly, without restriction, because Earth had believed that knowledge was better when it moved freely. He did not say these things with anger. He said them quietly, and that made them heavier. The hall was completely still. Then he set both hands flat on the desk in front of him and spoke his last words. The United Terran Authority has reviewed the Compact and Addendum 9 against the founding principles of this body. We have found them to be in direct violation of the articles under which we agreed to participate here. We have been patient. We have used the proper channels. We have waited. What we have received in return is a motion to take ownership of our technology, to restrict our growth, and to place our own government's decisions under the control of people who were not elected by our people and who do not answer to them. He paused for exactly 1 second. The United Terran Authority is therefore initiating a formal review of its continued participation in this body. Effective immediately, Earth is suspending all cooperative technology sharing agreements until that review is complete. We will not be returning to this chamber until the Compact and Addendum 9 are both withdrawn from the record in full. He picked up his documents. He straightened them once against the desk. He nodded to Murray. They walked out. The hall broke open behind them. The Volkai ambassador's voice rose above the others, translated words tumbling over each other as he demanded a formal objection be entered. 3 delegations immediately called for emergency sanction motions against Earth. The council chair struck the session tone twice, then 3 times, trying to bring order back to a room that had not seen anything like this in a very long time. None of it followed Junho and Murray into the corridor. They walked at the same pace as always, his shoes making the same soft sound on the floor, her data pad tucked under her arm. Around them, the station hummed and buzzed with the sound of 200 civilizations going about their day. A group of Loon diplomats passed them in the corridor and stared. A young Ethari aide stood by a wall and watched them go with an expression that was hard to read. Murray waited until they had turned the corner before she spoke. What do we do now if they push forward with the sanctions? Junho looked straight ahead. They will push forward with the sanctions. And they will spend the next several weeks discovering something they should have learned a long time ago. His voice was calm and even. You only have power over someone who needs something from you. She thought about the colonies, about the relay network, about Sorai running quietly across the stars, managing and watching and holding everything together without asking anyone for permission. She thought about 40 years of sitting in the back of that room, watching and learning and building, while the rest of the galaxy assumed that quiet meant weak. They don't know, she said softly. They still don't know what we built. No, Junho said, they don't. Somewhere far away, in a server room under a mountain on a small blue planet, Sorai processed 17 new data requests from human colonies and answered all of them in under a second. The galaxy had just made the most expensive mistake in its long history. It had pushed humanity to the door, and humanity had walked through it. The sanctions came down on a Wednesday. They were formal, official, and entered into the galactic record with the full weight of the Council behind them. Trade with Earth was suspended. Human vessels were denied docking rights at 14 Council-operated transit stations. Earth's diplomatic accounts on the Council network were frozen. A strongly worded statement was released, calling humanity's walkout a destabilizing act and urging Earth to return to the table and honor its agreements as an observer civilization. The Council expected a response within a week. Most of the senior delegates privately gave Earth 30 days before someone from Geneva called and asked to negotiate. The Volokkai ambassador told his staff that the humans would be back before the next full session. He said it with the same calm confidence he used for everything, and his staff nodded, and none of them questioned it, because it seemed so obvious. Humanity said nothing. A week passed, then two, then a month. The silence from Earth was total and clean, and it was far more unsettling than any protest would have been. On Earth, Prime Coordinator Suji watched the sanctions land and did not call an emergency session. She did not address the public immediately. She let 3 days pass, and then she held a regular scheduled briefing where she answered questions from the press in the same tone she always used, calm and specific. And when a journalist asked her how Earth planned to respond to the Council's sanctions, she said simply that Earth was reviewing its options and would act in the best interest of its people, and then she moved to the next question. Behind closed doors, the work had already been done. The colony arcs had been running on full independent supply for 6 weeks by the time the sanctions hit. Food, energy, manufacturing, communications, all of it running through human systems on human infrastructure without a single request going out to a council-affiliated supplier. The transition had been so gradual, so carefully staged over months, that most of the colonies had not even felt a change. Things just kept working. The lights stayed on. The food kept growing. Ships kept moving between human-controlled points along relay routes that had been quietly active for years. Sorai managed all of it. Every supply line across 31 colonies, every energy balance, every communication relay between Earth and its furthest settlements, all of it coordinated by a system that had been built slowly and carefully and was now running at full capacity without any strain. When the Council's network cut Earth's access, humanity's own network simply took over completely, and the switchover took less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes? The Council did not know this. They assumed that cutting Earth off from the main galactic communication grid would cause disruption. They assumed that human colonies spread across approved zones would begin feeling the pressure of supply chain interruptions within a few weeks. They assumed that isolation would do what political pressure had not. None of it happened the way they planned. What happened instead was quieter and came from a direction the Council was not watching. The first sign came from a small civilization called the Loon. They were not powerful. They occupied 2 systems, had a modest fleet, and had always stayed close to the middle of any vote, never drawing attention to themselves. They had voted in favor of the compact because the Volokkai had pressured them privately, and they had not felt strong enough to refuse. But for the past 9 years, the Loon had been receiving Earth's agricultural technology at no cost, and their food production had more than doubled because of it. When Earth suspended its technology-sharing agreements, the Loon's development office quietly ran a projection and found that without continued access to human agricultural support, their output would begin declining within 18 months. They sent a private message to the Council asking whether the sanctions could be made more flexible in the area of agricultural technology transfers. The Council told them the sanctions were total and non-negotiable. The Loon sent another message. This one went to Junho, through a back channel that passed through 3 relay points before arriving at the small human residential block on the station where he was still managing Earth's formal withdrawal process. It was very politely worded. It asked, carefully, whether Earth might be open to a conversation at some point when things had settled down. Junho read it and filed it without responding, but he noted the date. 3 days later, a similar message arrived from the Presi. Then from a small 2-system civilization called the Ethari, who had always been friendly toward humanity and had abstained from the compact vote rather than voting in favor. Then from 2 more civilizations whose names Murray had to look up because she had never heard them speak in any session she had attended. None of these messages were made public. They were quiet, careful and written in the careful language of people who were not ready to act, but were beginning to think about acting. Murray kept a list of them on her personal pad and showed it to Jun-ho one evening without comment. He read through it slowly. "Keep the list," he said. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the civilizations that had voted most enthusiastically for the compact were beginning to feel things they had not anticipated. 3 of them had been receiving human-built communication relays at subsidized rates as part of an agreement that Earth had quietly not renewed when the compact passed. Their communication networks, which had been quietly dependent on human maintenance contracts, began running slower. Requests for technical support went unanswered. Not because Earth was being hostile, simply because the people who used to answer those requests had been recalled home as part of the budget restructuring, and no replacements had been sent. The Council issued a formal complaint. Earth's diplomatic office on the station, now staffed by only Jun-ho, Murray, and 2 administrative workers, received the complaint and confirmed it had been logged. Nothing else happened. Commander D1 moved his fleet quietly. 4 carrier groups, which on paper were humanity's largest deep space vessels and which the compact had officially classified as civilian cargo haulers because they had been registered that way for years, repositioned to the edges of human-claimed space. They did not cross into anyone's territory. They did not target anything. They ran drills, loud ones. Their communication traffic was unencrypted and easy to monitor, which meant the Council's listening systems picked it up without any difficulty. Every day, across the edge of human space, D1's ships practiced maneuvers, ran targeting exercises, tested response times, and generally behaved like a military force that had been waiting a long time to stop pretending it was something else. 3 internal emergency sessions were called at the Council station within 2 weeks. None of their conclusions were made public, but the tone of the Council's official communications toward Earth shifted in a way that Murray noticed immediately. The language became slightly less firm. The deadlines in formal notices were extended quietly. Small adjustments, barely visible, but she had been reading Council documents long enough to know what they meant. "They're scared," she said one afternoon, sitting across from Jun-ho in the small human meeting room near their quarters. "They're uncomfortable," he said, which for a body that has been comfortable for 300 years feels the same as scared. Suji's public address came 6 weeks after the sanctions. It was broadcast on Earth's own network and transmitted on the human relay system to every colony and every human settlement in space. It was not angry. It was not a declaration of anything dramatic. It was clear and it was direct, and it was the kind of speech that people remember not because of how it was delivered, but because of how true it felt. She told the story simply. An observer civilization that had shared its knowledge freely, contributed to galactic stability for 40 years, and asked for nothing but a fair seat, had been handed a document stripping it of the right to govern itself. She said that Earth had not left the Council out of pride or anger. She said that Earth had left because it had been left no other choice by people who had mistaken patience for weakness and generosity for dependence. Then she said the lines that traveled furthest. "We came to the galactic community with open hands. We will not beg to keep them open, but we remember who treated those hands well and who tried to put chains on them." The broadcast was picked up by the Council's monitoring systems within hours. It was translated into 47 languages by morning. The Voakai delegation demanded the Council issue a formal condemnation. The vote to condemn passed, but only by a margin of 11. 2 months earlier, it would have passed by 100. Murray read the margin number and sat back in her chair. 11, she said quietly. Jun-ho was standing at the window, looking out at the stars the way he often did when he was thinking carefully about something. 6 months ago it would have been 150, she said. "Yes," he said. "So they're losing the room." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the orange star burned at the far edge of the viewport, steady and patient, and completely indifferent to the politics of the small ring of metal orbiting it. They were always losing the room, he said. They just didn't know it yet. Power that is built on making others small only holds for as long as those others believe they have no choice. He turned from the window. We showed them they had a choice. Murray looked at her list. It had grown to 22 civilizations now, all of them having sent quiet messages asking what came next. She did not know yet what Junho and Suji were planning, but she knew that the Council's neat, ordered galaxy, the one where humanity sat in the back and said thank you and filed its objections politely, was already gone. Something new was taking its place. And it was being built by the same people who had spent 40 years being told they were not important enough to vote. The delegation arrived at Earth on a Friday morning. There were 5 of them. They came on a mid-sized diplomatic vessel that descended through Earth's atmosphere quietly and landed at Geneva's international port without ceremony. No large escort, no formal parade of ships, just 5 beings stepping off a ramp into cool morning air, looking at a sky that was gray and soft with early cloud cover, and being met by a single human official who shook their hands and led them to a row of waiting vehicles. The delegation was not led by the Vorkai. That detail was not an accident. Everyone involved understood what it meant. The Council had chosen the Ethari to lead the delegation because the Ethari had always been considered a bridge, educated in human institutions, respectful in their dealings, and trusted on both sides of the disagreement. Sending the Vorkai would have felt like sending the people who started the fire to apologize for the smoke. Sending the Ethari said, quietly, that the Council understood it had gone too far and was trying, carefully, to find a way back. The lead Ethari envoy was named Nari. She was tall and pale-skinned, with large dark eyes and a way of holding very still when she listened that made people feel she was taking in every word rather than just waiting for her turn to speak. She had studied on Earth for 3 years in her youth, and she spoke fluent standard human language without a translation device. She had opposed the compact privately from the beginning, but had not had the political standing to say so publicly. Now she had been handed the most difficult diplomatic task in the galaxy, and she carried it with the steady expression of someone who intended to get it right. She was brought to the United Terran Authority building in Geneva, up to the 14th floor, and shown into a long meeting room with tall windows that looked out over the lake. The morning light was coming through the clouds now, pale and even. The water outside was calm. Suji was already seated when Nari entered. Junho sat to her left. Commander D1 sat to her right. 3 people. No large team. No row of aides and advisors filling the room. Just 3 people who had spent the better part of 2 years building something and who now sat across a table and waited to hear what the galaxy had finally decided to say. The Ethari delegation took their seats. Nari folded her hands on the table and looked at Suji directly. "We appreciate Earth receiving us," she said. Suji nodded once. "You made the trip. We received you. That much was easy." Her voice was not warm, but it was not cold either. It was the voice of someone who had decided to be completely honest and was saving everyone's time by starting that way. Nari opened a document on the slim pad in front of her and turned it so the humans could see. The Council has agreed to the following terms: full and complete repeal of the Human Containment Compact, full withdrawal of Addendum 9 from the Galactic Record, a formal apology, entered into the record and published on the Council's official network, and restoration of Earth's observer seat with an immediate proposal opened for discussion regarding a transition to full member status. She slid the pad across the table. Suji looked at it. Junho looked at it. D1 did not look at it. He was looking out the window at the lake with the expression of a man who had already decided something and was simply waiting for the conversation to reach the place he was already standing. Junho picked up the pad. He read it slowly from top to bottom, the way he read everything without rushing. Then he set it down. He straightened it once so its edges lined up with the edge of the table. Then he folded his hands and looked at Nari. "We appreciate the offer," he said. His voice was exactly as calm as it had been on the day he walked out of the council hall 7 months ago. "But we are no longer interested in an observer seat." The room was quiet. One of the other Ethari delegates shifted slightly. Nari did not move. Her large eyes stayed steady on Junho's face. "Then what does Earth want?" she asked. Suji reached into the folder in front of her and placed a document on the table. It was thicker than the one Nari had brought. She did not push it across immediately. She let it sit there for a moment. "We want a new table," she said. What followed was not a negotiation in the usual sense. It was a presentation. Suji spoke and Junho added details when needed, and D1 said almost nothing, but his presence in the room said enough on its own. They laid out what Earth was proposing with the same clarity and precision that had been the foundation of everything they had done for the past 2 years. The proposal was called the Parallel Accord. It was a second framework, not a replacement for the Galactic Council, not a rival built out of anger. It was simply a new structure, open to any civilization willing to operate under 3 principles that the current council had never managed to maintain consistently. Equal voting rights for every member, regardless of fleet size or territorial holdings. Transparent arbitration, meaning that any dispute between members would be handled through an open process that all parties could observe and review. And mutual non-interference, meaning that no member could pass a motion restricting another member's internal governance, its domestic technology, or its sovereign decisions. No observer tiers, no containment compacts, no Clause 7. Nari read the full document without speaking. When she finished, she looked up. "You are not asking to come back," she said. It was not quite a question. "We are not asking for anything," Suji said. "We are telling you what we are building, and we are extending an invitation to anyone who wants to be part of it. That includes civilizations currently in the Council. The 2 frameworks can exist alongside each other. We have no interest in destroying what is already there. We are only interested in building something better." There was a long pause. Outside, the clouds had broken slightly, and a narrow line of sunlight was moving across the surface of the lake. Nari looked at her delegation. Then she looked back at Suji. "I cannot commit the council to any response today," she said. "But I can tell you personally that I believe what you have built here is something that many civilizations have wanted for a very long time and did not know how to ask for." Suji looked at her for a moment. "I know," she said simply. "That is why we built it." The meeting ended an hour later. The Ethari delegation was shown back to their vehicle and returned to the port. Their ship lifted off in the early afternoon and climbed up through the clouds and was gone. By the time their vessel cleared Earth's atmosphere, 17 civilizations had already confirmed their signatures on the Parallel Accord. Junho had spent the previous 3 weeks meeting privately with representatives of the Loon, the Presi, the Ethari, and 14 others, in small rooms on the station, and through encrypted relay conversations, explaining what was coming and asking whether they were willing to stand beside something new. All 17 had said yes, before the Ethari delegation had ever boarded their ship for Earth. 11 more signed within the month. Murray was standing at the viewport of the new station when the last of those confirmations came through. The station was small compared to the Council's Great Ring. It had been built in 8 months by human engineers working alongside Loon and Presi construction teams, and it was clean and fast and felt different from the Council station in a way that was hard to name but easy to feel. There were no observer sections. Every corridor led to the same central hall. Every seat at the table had a voting button. Junho stood beside her at the viewport. Below them, a Loon diplomatic vessel was docking alongside a human carrier and an Ethari science ship. 3 civilizations, 3 ships, sitting next to each other without hierarchy, without tiers, without anyone being asked to sit in the back and watch. Do you remember what you asked me on the first day? Junho said. She thought back to that corridor on the council station, 7 months and a lifetime ago. I asked if we should protest, she said. And now? She watched the 3 ships settle into their docking positions. She thought about the vote that had passed without asking them, about the compact, about Clause 7, about 2 decades of quiet building and 19 years of patience, and a 6-word message sent in the dark at 4 in the morning. No, she said, I think we did it the right way. Junho looked out at the ships, and the stars beyond them, and the vast, open dark that stretched in every direction without any walls or tiers or observer sections anywhere in sight. Noise gets you a response, he said quietly. Silence gets you leverage, he paused, and walking away gets you a new table entirely. Outside the viewport, more ships were coming, from different directions, from different stars, all of them heading to the same place for the first time. Not because they were told to. Because they chose to.